It is 12 o'clock up and down noon here in Bluntstown, Florida. So we're going to get started with our No Mow March, Gardening in the Panhandle live. Thank you so much for joining us today. We have a really interesting program for you and a great group of panelists. And I'll start by introducing those. Beth, say hello to us.
She's muted.
Sorry, everyone. Hi, I'm Beth Bowles over here in Escambia County, work in horticulture.
Awesome. Hey, Mark.
Hey there, Daniel. Mark Tanzig, Leon County Horticulture Agent here in Tallahassee.
Good deal. And relative newbie, Josh Chris.
I'm Josh. I'm Santa Rosa County Horticulture Agent, Pastor Gardener Overlord. I'll call it Overlord.
All right. Good deal. Thanks to Beth, Josh, and Mark for being on our panel today. We've got some great folks behind the scenes. Julie McConnell in Bay County, Evan Anderson in Walton County, and Matt Lawler also in Santa Rosa County. So we're going to get started. Our first question, this is very on topic for a No Mow March webinar. Mark, the question is, what does No Mow March mean?
Well, Daniel, it's pretty self-explanatory, but basically
can be misinterpreted though.
It can be, yeah. So basically what we're trying to do, right, the horticulture agents of the Northwest District, we are trying to promote people, to promote homeowners and, wherever you are, you have a lawn, to kind of take it easy this March and back off altogether, or at least, leave a little patch in your little area of turf and leave it unmowed, right? And the idea is, we have a website that explains more of it. So I know in the chats we'll be putting in some information here, but there is a website. Beth Bowles did a great job. Good job, Beth, putting a lot of that together. And, the deal with why are we doing this? And this was borrowed from another spot, right? So up in Wisconsin, and I have a New York Times article linked that should come up in the chat here about where the original inspiration for this came from. Up in Wisconsin, they do no mow May, right? But that's going to be hard to pull off in Florida because in May, you stop mowing the grass for any period of time and you won't be able to see the house pretty soon, right? So March had that nice ring, right? No mow March. And what the point of this is to leave a little bit for the pollinators. This is a kind of tight resource-wise time for a lot of bees, maybe even butterflies and other pollinators. A lot of our ornamentals, a lot of our native plants haven't fully kind of come out and started blooming yet. And so they're already up, especially with those little blasts of heat we had, right? Insects are kind of awakening out of their little winter slumber and they're looking for pollen, nectar. And so some of these, a lot of people consider weeds, right? That are, coming up in these unmowed lawns. They are going to be providing that much needed resource, right? And so again, you don't have to stop mowing the whole yard. And, even so, say you're in a homeowners association and it does require a height restriction or something. Maybe you mow it at the height that's required and you just back off on the frequency a little bit. There's actually research showing, they call it the lazy lawnmower approach, that even just going from a week of interval of mowing to 2 to 3 weeks, there's really significant jumps in pollinators that visit that area. So we're just helping out the pollinators and we're helping everyone out, just take a break.
That's exactly right. Yeah, just kind of ease into the spring yard maintenance this year and give the pollinators a little place to go and play around and get something to eat. So thanks, Mark. Beth, this next question is near and dear to my heart. I actually messaged you about an issue with this one the other day in my own yard. And so the question is, Beth, do you have any suggestions to convince people, this listener said, including my husband, to not mow and leave a natural area? So how do we deal with the spouses that want that perfect manicured yard?
It's going to be a case-by-case basis. You're going to know how you can approach someone. Hopefully we can convince or persuade someone of the benefits of leaving grass alone for just a little bit longer. We can work on their saving time. They can do other things. But also, if you do have to mow, it's still okay. Maybe you compromise and leave just a small area on a side yard or on a backyard where it's not as visible to the public or your neighbors. So those would be good things. Now, if mowing's still going to happen, maybe you add some container plants or visit the nursery and spend some money at the nursery on some native shrubs or trees that are flowering now. So it's not just about the grass, it's about providing other resources for these pollinators. So kind of take that approach, see which one works, start with the grass itself, and then work your way up to some of those other alternatives.
That's exactly what I did. So that's awesome. Yeah, we've got a group of friends coming over to the house for a little get together this weekend. And so I had to mow the grass. And so I just mowed the areas that didn't have lots of weeds in bloom. You know, I left the blooming weeds. So left the flowers for the
Good
pollen.
job, Daniel. Yeah.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah. So I learned everything I know from Mark and Beth. So, Mark,
Everything he
coming
knows
back,
about not mowing.
that's right. So, yeah. So Mark, you've been practicing this for many years. So
Yeah.
Mark, coming back to you real quick. Do you have any current data on species and counts of butterflies that overwinter in Florida? So what kind of butterflies actually may hang out here during these cooler months?
That was a tricky one to find some really good hard data on, but
Yeah.
we do have some resources that we'll be putting in the chat here. One of them is basically the butterfly gardening document from the University of Florida. So Jarrett Daniels at the Museum of Natural History is a great resource on all things butterfly, and he's got this document, and in the back, it's like a 20-some page document. There's only like 4 pages that talk about, the gardening part of it. And then it's all these tables with individual butterflies, and it has their flight season. So you'll see like some of the swallowtails are already out, and you might have seen some already. So, you'll be looking on that chart that we put in there. You'll be looking at the end to see when the flight season is, basically that, starting in February at some point. And if you want particular information, I was able to look up, I think, the Eastern tiger swallowtail on the Featured Creatures website, which is a really, really great website if you're interested in anything insects. University of Florida's entomology department put together a really great, website with all these things, and they have all that life cycle information that this person is probably looking for. So when do they go into the soil and just kind of hang out for the winter? When do they emerge? And I think that's all I got for you. I couldn't find any hard numbers. I found a couple of scientific articles looking at very particular butterflies, but something in general like that is, I guess we'll have to tell Jared, he needs to put that together.
So there are a few species out and about though, even at this.
Oh
early
yeah.
date.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I've already seen some of the, there was a banded sulfur, there's the little yellow ones that are coming out. I'm a plant guy. I don't know all the names of the butterflies, but there's the little yellow ones. There's the swallowtails, the Palamedes swallowtail. I think I saw that one the other day. So there's a lot that are coming out right now and that need those resources.
Great. So Josh, we're assuming that everybody involved here is doing no mow March, but let's say we're moving away from the turf grass and we still want to attract some pollinators. So at this time, it's a good time to be, in some cases putting some plants into the garden or the yard. What type of plants should folks be looking at to attract pollinators the rest of the year, not just in the turf grass?
I think what you really need to look at first is what pollinators actually are. Because when you say pollinators to people, a lot of times they're going to think honeybees, or they're going to think butterflies, but they need to realize there's things like bats are pollinators. There's things like hummingbirds are pollinators. Your native bees, there's honeybees, there's all kinds of different critters out there that act as pollinators. And when you're thinking about what plants you want to place out there for them, what you need to think about is how they eat, really. So you want to think about their mouth. A lot of like your hummingbirds, for instance, they like those tubular flowers because their mouth fits into it perfectly. So if you want hummingbirds, you need things like coral bean or coral honeysuckle, or a lot of your hibiscus work for them. If you're worried about your bees, they have much more of like a spongy type mouth. And so a lot of things like your hollies and your glossy abelias, if I could actually speak, would be great. And goldenrod, things like that work really well for bees. And then for your butterflies, some stuff you might not think about, like redbud trees, for instance, are pretty good plants for them. And you really need to think about what they're looking for. Do they want pollen out of those plants? Do they want nectar out of those plants? Or are they looking for some sort of larval host plant? And a lot of milkweeds are good for the larval host plants as well on that front. And then as far as your shelters for them, your shelters and your hives, again, you need to think about what they need. So a hummingbird is going to be looking to build a nest. So if you have a nice bushy sort of protected plant off to the side, you're probably going to get hummingbird nests in those. bees, for instance, some are ground nesting, some are not ground nesting. So if you have not ground nesting bees, then you're going to want to build a little hotel for them. And I think we have a link for that. And then you just need to make sure that there's some wild areas out there for the ground nesting bees to get habitat in. So really do, it's very species dependent what they want.
Yeah, so you can't just go out there and plant a bunch of one thing and that's a quote unquote pollinator plant and have it attract lots of pollinators. Got to have a little holistic approach from Josh Chris there. I like that. I appreciate that, Josh. Josh, we're coming back to you.
All
So
right.
you're gonna probably say, you know, I know what you're gonna say. It's gonna be, it depends. But what are some of I don't really understand the question. It says best pollinators for Northwest Florida. What are some of our more, maybe a better word to put is, what are some of our more prominent pollinators for Northwest Florida that we're looking at?
Well, our most prolific one, of course, is honeybees. You can't really beat those because everybody cultivates them specifically for pollination, well, and honey. But a lot of the native bees are actually going to be really doing a lot of the lion's share of that work. Some that I like in particular are the blue orchard bee. It's that little tiny one. It almost looks green, actually. You may see it running around. You may think it's a fly, but it's actually a little bee, and they're really neat looking. So you have to watch out for those. And then sweat bees. And of course, when I'm out in the yard, I always like to put my finger out and let the sweat bee land on it because they're just fun. But again, there's all manner of things that are pollinators that you might not think about. Things like beetles. Beetles are what's going to pollinate your pawpaw trees and things of that nature. A lot of flies are actually pollinators, and people don't ever think about them. So you really do need to, whatever plants you have out there, you just kind of need to figure out what makes them pollinate. But for the most part, it's going to be your native bees that are doing a lot of the work around here.
Okay, very good. We're going to stay with you for one more here, Josh. So
another one.
Yeah, one more. A lot of 3 in a row. A lot of shady landscapes, you know, got big live oaks, big large pine trees, lots of things like that, especially over near the coast where y'all are. So what are some good native pollinator plants that would actually grow in those environments under those shady canopies?
So a lot of people think you can't grow anything that flowers under a shady canopy. That's not necessarily true. And as far as pollinators go, a lot of your gingers are actually going to be very good for that. They like a little bit shadier environment. And so like peacock gingers and your ornamental gingers and even blue ginger, which I don't think is actually a real ginger, but it's a nice flowering plant that's going to attract a lot of pollinators. And some other things like your leopard plants, your farfugium, they're actually an aster. People don't ever think of them as being an aster, but they are. So they're a sunflower, but they grow in the shade. Those are going to attract a lot of pollinators too. And then things like crossandra, which I don't think is a very common landscape plant, but those attract a lot of pollinators. There's a lot of things that will grow in the shade that do a really good job in the shade that pollinators are actually attracted to.
Interesting. So not just those full sun plants. Very good. So Beth, coming to you over there in Escambia County, this is an interesting question. So we've talked a lot about turf grass and not mowing the grass, but this listener here says, is there a ground cover or a turf grass alternative that's also good for pollinators, but can sustain heavy traffic? That's going to be a tall order. What do you think?
This is a very hard order because the heavy traffic is the key. You know, the reason turf grass does so well, and not all turf grasses take heavy traffic. We're looking at some zoysia and Bermuda that are really tolerant of consistent walking. Even some dog activity may be too much for some of those grasses.
Yeah, we were safe until they threw that part in.
Yeah, the heavy we could have come up with some options. So you may not a pollinator plant may not meet the needs of that. So you're going to have to think of these in other places. But for other people that don't necessarily have heavy traffic, we have a lot of kind of ground cover plants that can fit in. Remember, ground cover doesn't just have to hug the ground. It can be a little bit higher. But some of your ones you're hearing more about, of course, are the powder puff mimosa. As long as you have plenty of room for that one to spread. That is not a small landscape plant.
It's an aggressive plant.
It's aggressive. It's a native, but it does grow well.
Yeah.
Another one to mix into existing turf would be frog fruit. It's going to look a little different, but when you mow it, it's going to kind of blend in and has this really interesting little match head flower. And it's host to several butterflies too. So that one does well. More people are trying perennial peanut. We'll see about the value of that for pollinators, but that is still a mix with turf and can reduce some of your fertilization needs and things like that. For others, twin flower is also a host. That one kind of spreads a lot too, so be careful. You'll end up with that one in different places. But for heavy traffic, you're still going to have to stick with some of the turf grasses.
What about the I've noticed in my yard and particularly some of the shady areas, I've got a lot of the little violet blooming right now.
Yeah, and that's one thing. We may look at some of these plants we call weeds, and they may end up as good mixtures for turf that hold
Yeah.
up really well. A lot of the vetches and beggar weeds and in that group really can improve a turf grass area and will take a little bit of that traffic as
Yeah.
long as you don't mind a difference in texture.
Yeah.
And it's just being a little more tolerant and not necessarily considering something a weed anymore. And that can offer some good food for our pollinators.
Free your mind, Beth
We
says.
have to. My yard now is a mix of centipede, perennial peanut, and powder puff mimosa, and it's just fine.
That's awesome. Love
And
that.
Daniel, same here. I was, Beth hit it, having that mixture, right? Just if, kind of backing off on the mowing maybe as much, you'll get these things come up that'll just be mixed in.
I
The
love it, man.
violets, the
Cool,
basket
yeah.
grass, things like that. Yeah.
The black medic gives the little splashes of yellow here and there. It's
Yeah,
pretty cool.
not bad.
Yep. So Josh, back to you. Mark, I promise we hadn't forgotten about you.
It's fine. I'm just gonna not mow my grass. It's fine.
That's right. You just stay over there and don't mow. So, Josh, this is a really cool question. So, companion planting with native plants to attract pollinators. So, you think there's a place to just include some native plants in the landscape to attract pollinators as well?
There's absolutely a place for that. And so normally when you think about companion planting, you're really talking more about vegetables is where you see the majority of information on that, which is near and dear to my heart because I'm an edible landscaping guy. If you can't eat it, it doesn't belong in your yard, as far as I'm concerned. And my ladies out there this morning were actually planting, I believe, marigolds interspersed with a bunch of different herbs this morning. So companion planting can definitely be used for pollinators as well. Anything that, again, that attracts that pollinator. If you want bees, then you need something that attracts bees in there and mix it in with your vegetables and they'll go ahead and pollinate your vegetables along with everything else. There's certainly a place for it. Absolutely.
Cool. Thanks.
And a lot of, I think I linked to, of course, this is a little self-serving, but I linked to something that we all wrote
Yeah.
on there. So there's some stuff in there about using goldenrod and things of that nature.
Yeah, if you don't promote yourself, who's going to promote you?
Exactly.
So
Anything that's wildflowers is good.
there you go. Beth, this is always a hot topic and an important topic. There's a lot of misinformation out there about. Could you, Beth, for me, please compare the tropical versus the native milkweeds? And are they both beneficial for monarch butterflies? And how do we manage those?
All right, so we've been growing a lot of the tropical milkweed for years, which is the Asclepias curassavica, because it's easy to grow. We can grow it easily from seeds and from cuttings. It does well in our heat and humidity. It lasts a long time.
It's widely available.
It's widely available at your nurseries. It's what you're mostly going to find. And so that's what all of us have grown for many, many years. And monarchs are attracted to it. They'll be laying eggs, raising young, feeding on flowers. However, there's a problem with that tropical milkweed. It does live longer in our climate, doesn't tend to die back like your natives. And so there's two things. It can host a pathogen on there that the monarchs can get on their body, and it interferes with their development, causes them to die back. Secondly, because it lives so long into the fall, it may interrupt the migration process of these monarchs, causing them to hang around, which under this year in December, if they had hung around, they would be dead. And there's really not anything for them to eat. So for tropical milkweed, if we're going to grow it, we want to cut it back in early fall. Make sure, cut it to the ground. It's not there. Let monarchs move on and go. So we're going to really be promoting these native milkweeds, the tuberous milkweed, a couple of species of swamp milkweed, the incarnata, the perennis. Those can be found in certain spots in our counties along the Panhandle. Sometimes they're a little bit harder to grow for people. You need to find the right spot. Some of them like dry, some like moist. Make sure you match the specific one with your site. And if you're growing them from seed, they don't always come out with a burst of everything germinates, or they germinate, then they may die off. But you just keep trying with natives. If we can get more stands of natives out there, that's what we want to be growing in the milkweed realm. So I know my colleagues and I, if we have a plant sale, we're really starting to offer more natives to people to try to get that population built up. But don't let one try that it's not as showy or it doesn't do as well really cut you away from growing natives.
Awesome. Very good. I got a really fun question for everybody here, all of my panelists, and we're going to start with Mark. Mark, you've been quiet for a while. I know you've been ruminating on all those thoughts that are going on, and so we're going to let you go first here. And so the question is, what flowers attract bees? And I want us to approach it from, if a client comes and asks you, I can only add one plant to attract bees to my yard, what are you going to recommend to them, Mark?
Well, today I'm going to pick yarrow. So,
Okay.
kind of anything in that aster family. Josh mentioned the asters a little bit ago. They have lots of flowers and a nice little landing pad for pollinators. And yarrow comes in all different colors, easy to grow. So I'm going to pick yarrow for you.
All right, Beth, what you giving us? What are you giving them?
Okay, I'm going to go with my favorite plant, which is false rosemary conradina. I'm a low maintenance person. There's a lot of us that live in very sandy, poorly drained soil. It is going to be an awesome plant for you. It's blooming right now. It will sporadically bloom later. And a lot of our larger bees are visiting those flowers.
All right, Josh, Chris, what you got for this client 1B plant?
Coreopsis. Probably
Okay.
your best one. You can't get rid of it. You can't make that stuff die, and it's gonna flower like crazy.
There you go. And I'm going to come at
Another
it.
aster. What do you got,
Yeah.
Daniel?
I said, I'm going to come at it from the vegetable garden perspective. When I'm out in my garden and I've got my cover crops going, and there, man, bees are just all over my buckwheat all the time when it's blooming. So if you garden, get some buckwheat going out there, and the pollinators will find you. You plant it, they will come for sure. So that's really good. I appreciate that. Good answers, everybody. Beth, we're getting close to the end. Just want to remind everybody, if y'all have any further questions, as we close up here in a few minutes, just feel free to ask them in the Q&A down there or in the chat, and we'll be happy to get to those. We should have plenty of time today to get to your questions. So, Beth, this is a great question that a lot of people don't think about all the time. What actually attracts hummingbirds? What are they looking for in flowers? And if you could you cover like artificial feeders, and are those appropriate for yards?
Yeah, so Josh gave us a great description of the hummingbird mouth part, which is a little bit different than our bees and butterflies. It's going to go in, it needs a tubular flower, so pretty long. So some of my favorite plants for hummingbirds are the non-native Russellias. I love the red rocket. I love the firecracker. They are all over, and we'll fight over those. Your Kufias or cigar flowers are excellent perennials. If you need, if you can grow the bottle brush, that tends to do well. The native firebush, they will, if you can plant several of those. So you need groupings of these plants, not just one, and in different areas of the yard, because they are territorial. And then maybe some vines, like the coral honeysuckle, or even now some of the cross vine, the native vines like that. So there are lots of options. Remember, you don't always have to go with red flowers. We have an Amistad blue salvia, purple salvia. They love that plant. It comes on in the early spring, and they are all over it. So things like that will attract in the hummingbirds. Now, they need a lot of nectar. That is just the energy driver. So what you may want to think is supplementing some of your plants with a feeder. The key with that feeder is make your solution, if you would like, use just plain old sugar. Absolutely do not use artificial sweeteners or honey or anything other than just white sugar. So think of your hand, 1 part sugar, your thumb, get it in the front, 4 parts water. And you can boil that up, let it cool a little bit, and then put that, so it's dissolved, put that in your feeder. If you're going to do an artificial feeder and you are like me, somewhat a little bit lazy at home, I'm not going to do one. I'm not going to clean it often enough. So every 3 to 5 days in the hot sun, you need to be checking it,
Wow.
cleaning it out. You clean your feeder with, and make sure the parts come apart because you need to clean that well. But clean it with, vinegar and water so that we're not harming those hummingbirds. So just make sure you're consistent with that. No red dyes are needed. You don't buy any solution with red dye. There's some possibilities that could be injurious to the hummingbirds. So add more plants to your yard. That's the best thing that you can do for our hummingbirds.
Gotcha. That's great, Beth. I had no idea you needed to clean it that often, so that's pretty good. I might have been known to leave a coffee cup or two on my desk for a week or so with a little bit of coffee in there, and you'd be surprised what grows in there too. So I cannot imagine drinking out of a sugar water container after 5 days in the summer sun. So it's keep your treat your hummingbirds like you would treat yourself, I guess. There you go. So thanks, Beth.
We're not grabbing a cup from Daniel's office.
Yeah, so I'm safe after that one for sure. Mark, we open with you, and we're coming back to you here at the close here pretty soon. I am going to spring a surprise question on y'all in a minute, though. Mark, this question: I'm new to North Florida. That's pretty common. Over 1,000 people move to Florida every day, and many are coming up here in the Panhandle. So new to North Florida, and would like to know what to look for in my area. And that was all I got for the question. And so I assume they're talking about what kind of pollinator plants they need to be looking for, possibly.
Yeah. So when I saw this question, I started thinking of kind of groups that this person might want to get involved with to learn more about their local environment, right? So the first one I'll put up there is the Florida Master Naturalist Program. So contact some of your local county extension offices, see if they're providing the Master Naturalist courses. These are these awesome training programs where you have experts come in. There's different modules, there's coastal and uplands and this and that, and they'll take you to all these different locations. You often do field trips. You learn about the animals, the plants, and those different ecosystems. So check out first Master Naturalist with University of Florida.
Definitely.
And then,
great program.
Florida state parks. I think I put a link, and there'll be a link in here about, go to a local state park. A lot of them have some interpretive type signage so you can learn about what's there. There's sometimes programs that they offer at these parks that can help you learn more about the local environment. And then you have something like the Native Plant Society, right? So they have these various environmental organizations that are really open to encouraging people to join. So again, the Native Plant Society, there's lots of local chapters. They often do monthly programs, and then usually a field trip is part of that, where you're going with really knowledgeable plant people out into the woods to look at things. And then I think I put Appalachia Audubon in there as well. So another good organization with local chapters. And they're mostly interested in bird watching, but you can't have all these awesome birds without all the plants that support them, right? So often they're learning about a lot of those different things. And then iNaturalist is just, you don't want to go join lots of people, use your smartphone, and you can take pictures of what you're seeing with iNaturalist. And we even have a No-Mow March iNaturalist project. So if you're out there, I'm going to try to go out there sometime this week and get some pictures in my yard about all those crazy things coming up. But you can go out there, you can take a picture with iNaturalist, and it kind of gives you an answer. And then an actual person comes behind and confirms what you're seeing. So those would be my recommendations.
I love that tip about the state parks. If you're trying to mimic kind of the native landscape, they take really good care of those natural areas, and you kind of see what your yard would have looked like before people were there. So that's kind of cool. You can try to mimic that. So great tip, Mark. Thank you. So for kind of all of y'all, we'll start with Beth on this one. This is a question that I've gotten a bunch lately and been on site visits with. Folks had a lot of our pollinator plants are kind of tender, right? And so we got very cold, and a lot of our pollinator plants froze back. And so I know we touched on this in one of our previous Gardening of the Panhandle lives, but for this group, Beth, if you had some pollinator plants, like I've seen a lot of bottle brush that were killed all the way back to the ground, some hibiscus that were killed all the way back. At one point, you cover it however you want, but also get to at what point is it best to just kind of start over with a new plant or kind of baby it back to life?
Right. So we'll use your bottle brush as an example. Usually that becomes kind of a large shrub, small tree for us. So if it got killed back really hard where you have just a trunk left, it may be time to start over with a new plant. cut your losses, go ahead, enjoy a new plant with lots of good growth, and let that come back out that way. You'll get flowers sooner instead of waiting for several years for it to recover. With a lot of our perennials that freeze usually every year, they're going to come back roaring to life really soon. We're already seeing little bits of green growth on the stems, on the base. An example is we have one called sweet almond. And sweet almond is kind of a newer plant for us because we used to not be able to grow it here, but it is already 6 feet tall. We thought it had frozen, but new growth is coming out that high on the plant. So some of those you're definitely going to want to keep, and they will come back just fine, even if it's something like a firebush or a princess flower. It's just all going to come from the base, but they do well in our area. So you don't have to start over with everything.
Awesome. Thanks, Beth. And Mark, you brought us in. I'm going to let you take us out here. It's a great question to end with. Besides not mowing in March, which we're not doing, right? What else should we be doing?
Well, March is a great time to, now that March 15th for us in here in Tallahassee area is about the last average frost date. So that's usually when we say go in and clean up all that frostbitten stuff, right? All the dead branches that are still hanging onto those perennials. March is a good time to go in there and clean all that stuff up. This would also be a really good time to divide some of those perennials, right? If you want to, break a larger chunk and give some to friends or kind of like split it up a little bit, this would be a great time to do that. There's a lot. It's springtime, right? So there's a lot of activities you could be doing. We do have a link to the North Florida Gardening Calendar, which is a really great publication that kind of breaks it down, right? Because if you want to be planting annuals, right, this is going to be the time of year where some of those warm season annuals will start going in. Your vegetable garden, right? You should kind of already be having that prepped up, ready to go, because it's going to be past the last frost here soon. Pruning back the dead stuff, but maybe also any other kind of pruning just in general around the landscape. Fertilization of your turf or your perennials, right? This is again going to be a time for that. So there's lots to be doing right now in the garden. So the great thing is you're not going to be mowing, so you're going to have time to do all these other tasks that otherwise would be stuck pushing the mower around. Now you can go play and do some other fun gardening tasks.
That's right. Lots of free time has just come available because you don't have to mow. Wonderful. It's wonderful. There's so many things you can do. Just think about it. And so before we close here, I do want to mention, check out our No Mow March website. Definitely take our No Mow March pledge. Like Mark mentioned earlier, doesn't have to be the whole yard. We don't want to, anger the neighbors, the spouses or anything, but we do want to help those pollinators. So maybe just pick some areas of your yard where you're just going to stay out of for another, 20, 30 days, something like that, and give the pollinators somewhere to hang out. Also, we appreciate everybody for tuning in today. It's been a lot of fun, got a lot of information out. It's been a short little session, but a good little session. Please take our survey. It helps us plan future editions of Gardening in the Panhandle Live, lets us know how we're doing and how to best move forward. And also, as always, don't forget to tune into our next session. Go ahead and register so you can get your question answered live on the air. The next edition of Gardening in the Panhandle Live will be on April the 13th, and we're going to be focusing on home citrus. So those backyard citrus plants. I know I got fewer citrus plants than I did in November, but going to need to know how to care for those. I know many of you are in the same boat as me. Maybe you're thinking about replacing some citrus. What will be some good new varieties to add? There will be lots of great information and another great panel on there. And we'll go ahead and say goodbye to our panelists here. Mark, you want to leave us with a thought today?
Go out and enjoy those things that people call weeds in your yard, because they're just beautiful flowers, just like all the other ones.
Great. Beth, you got anything to leave the group?
Yeah, there's just lots to see. I agree with Mark. Just take it easy.
Take it easy and enjoy it. And finally, Josh.
I would agree with both of them. Be lazy if you can be lazy. Works hard enough.
That's right.
Plus, like Mark said, flowers are beautiful.
That's right. Leave the yard alone. It's a wonderful time to get your vegetable garden going, that kind of thing. So there's other ways you can use your time. So keep on not mowing in March. Come back and join us in April, and we will see y'all next time on Gardening in the Panhandle Live. Good afternoon.
Bye, everyone.